Hey, Anya Tanyavutti, thank you so much for your time today here at Jennifer's Edibles to sit down with Evanston Live TV, get us updated on District 65.
Hey, Evanston Live.
All right, ladies, so you and I have been talking, and huge concerns still over the achievement gap.
Hmm.
And this achievement gap has been going on for years. I mean, even with family members that I have.
Hmm.
Um, I won't mention which school, but at one point they were advanced until they started at this particular grade school in District 65, and then they were set back. I mean, they had to be put in special programs and whatever, and then when they got out of grade school, got over to ETHS, they excelled and then ended up graduating one of the top 10 universities. So, in talking to you, I know that there have been some improvement, but the gap itself is still not closing.
Yeah, so I want to, I think it's important that we be specific with our language too.
Mm-hmm.
So I prefer to talk about the gap in opportunity to achieve, which
Okay.
highlights the responsibility of that gap
Mm-hmm.
is on the system to create opportunities for folks to demonstrate their true aptitude. Um, and our systems are not allowing equal and equitable access to all of us, um, as the vestiges of 400 years of oppression. um, and we see that in how schools have limited access for children, black children, to achieve, access for black parents to feel connected and informed. um, And in the intentional work that we've been doing in District 65 over the last 3 years, we've seen some opportunities to change the system so that it is more inclusive and is less harmful, and hopefully also repairing and healing relationships and past trauma. But 3 years is not enough to rebuild 400 years of trauma and pain.
You had
And
stated earlier, you and I were talking, that it was designed this way. So, what do you think is the issue with people recognizing that it was designed, this gap was designed?
our systems in this country, unfortunately, are founded upon a belief that black humanity is not full humanity,
Mm.
and that other humanity is more valuable through the oppression and the suppression of black folks. And we have seen that in our voices simply not being included, um, in maltreatment once we are in systems. We see that in how some children, I experienced this as a child. I actually went to desegregated schools in a university town, and I know the pain of systems not designed to see me and to care for me and to love me and invest in me. I understand what that felt like as a child, and I
Mm.
can empathize what that must have felt like as a parent. And that is part of what drives me to look for how our institution can create opportunities for healing and repair. And so there are things that are moving, but we are not by any means at the end of this work. We are at the beginning. And we need to see it through. And I'm excited about the opportunity for our new superintendent to continue to see this work through. Um, 3 years ago, I actually sat down at my very first board meeting as a board member, reviewing the Achievement and Accountability Report. And I think the word that I used at that meeting was that I felt like it was demoralizing. And it continues to feel that way, to see the persistence of the gap and to see that it's racialized. And the reason why that is painful and demoralizing is because I know the aptitude of our children. And I know that it is vast and it is great. And I know that it is not predetermined based on any child's race. And I would like to see outcomes that reflect the true aptitude of all of our children. What is encouraging is to see the places where numbers are improving. So they're at one of our schools, I can't remember the exact school off the top of my head, but one of the schools demonstrated that Black students' college and career readiness percentages had changed from 15% to 31%, which is an incredible jump in 1 year.
What do you think has caused that jump?
Well, in the last, and I don't think there's one thing that we can point to, but I think if we look at what has been happening in District 65 over the last 3 years, one of the things that's happened is we've made a concerted effort to make policy through the lens of racial equity. And as a result of that, we have thought about how we are distributing funds, how we are creating programs, how we are creating policy through the lens of closing the gap in opportunity to achieve and the racial predictability of those outcomes. That has meant that every single one of our educators, leaders, board members has participated in racial equity training. And so that means that there is a language that we can use throughout our system. And I don't like the hierarchical terms top to bottom, but if we were to use them throughout our system top to bottom, we are all using similar language regarding our commitment to racial equity in terms of academic outcomes as well as discipline outcomes. We also revised the discipline policy to make it rooted in restorative justice. So rather than a punitive discipline policy that contributes to the school to prison pipeline, we requested that we have a holistic, social and emotional focused discipline policy that aims to help children restore and heal rather than punish when something is challenging. And as a result, when we reviewed last year's discipline report, what we saw was a drop across the board in discipline numbers.
Is that because more parents, there were numerous times when parents gathered outside District 65, with signs and, they were fighting. Definitely last year, I witnessed that. Do you think that's because the parents are becoming more vocal about how they're choosing to discipline, who they're choosing to discipline?
I think that our schools are a public good. They belong to all of us. And 60% of the children in District 65 identify as Black, Latinx, or another identity that is not white. 40% of our children identify as white. What I appreciate is I feel like our entire community has locked arms in commitment to racial equity. And we've seen that in folks' pursuit of participation in Beyond Diversity and Seed, not just our educators, but parents and community members. And I think that we roundly have support for making policy that creates an environment that is less hostile to children bringing them their whole selves to school, their home vernacular, their home culture, and making sure that we are interacting in ways that are seeking connection and understanding. And I think that we are seeing the result of that investment. I wouldn't put this weight solely on the shoulders of parents. It's important for parents' voices to be heard, and one of the positive changes that I think that have been made as a gesture towards healing is the investment of funds in allowing for an African American, Black, and Caribbean parent group to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And the ABC group has been meeting for 3 years now on a regular basis. We actually have a meeting coming up January 23rd, next week. And we will have one of the interim superintendents, and we will also be talking about preparing for conferences. And we have a budget line that supports us having dinner and childcare at each of our meetings, has allowed us to do end of the year events, back to school kickoff events, etc., through District 65. And I think that is an investment in us coming together, building community, building knowledge, and sharing our voice back to the district. And that's important as well. But I think that the investment in restorative justice and equity training is the reason why we see those discipline numbers changing.
How do you heal trauma?
How do we heal trauma?
Mm-hmm.
We have to talk about it. I think the phrase that I've heard in circles where folks talk a lot about healing is that systems and family systems, institutional systems are only as sick as their secrets. And I think that it's really important that we as a community, that we as an institution acknowledge the harm that racism has caused and continues to cause, and we acknowledge our responsibility collectively to repair that. And that's why I think racial equity work is not just about Black folks talking about what's been painful. Racial equity work is about the entire community talking about how systems of oppression used against marginalized voices harms everyone. And we heal together. And so the other point of repair, I think, has been the superintendent search that we just engaged in. The superintendent search practices writ large are rather common from consulting group to consulting group. And one of the things that we decided as a board was that we wanted to specifically infuse racial equity into those practices. And so we specifically asked, well, if you're going to create a leadership profile that will then advise how you make your posting and then advise how you interview and how you evaluate candidates, then we need to make sure we create that leadership profile based on the voices of those who have been marginalized. If we're going to close the gap in opportunity, then we need to open opportunity to folks who have historically had opportunities closed to them. And so we specifically looked to how we engage with marginalized voices. How do we get our Black constituents, our Latinx constituents, our constituents with children who have IEPs? We want to hear your voice. What do you need in a leader? What do you need in our system in order to better serve you and in order to create opportunities for you and your children? We specifically pursued those voices, and the search firm was actually shocked that we were able to get the amount of feedback and the diversity of feedback that we were able to get. We had over 1,000 respondents via focus groups, surveys, and interviews. And we then applied our racial equity impact assessment tool to the leadership profile in order to elevate the trends and voices from marginalized populations. And that affected the posting that we made for the superintendent, which then affected the interview questions that we asked, which then affected the evaluation rubric that we used. So this process was meant to offer some repair for the many decades and centuries that marginalized voices have not been allowed to have any influence over the systems that they were required to participate in. And so our next superintendent was selected and selected us, right? Selected our school district to apply to based on the marginalized voices in our community and what those needs are.
Well, we're looking forward to the work that's ahead, and thank you for the improvements that have been made, and let us know what we need to do to assist in that gap. Definitely.
Yeah, and I want to point everyone to the accountability and achievement report that was released, as well as each of the school reports that was included in that. That was specifically provided so that folks had racial equity content information to guide their understanding of what's happening at their children's school. And encourage you all to check that out and check out those highlights at Kingsley, Oakton, and I believe there was some growth at Dawes as well. So thank you for inquiring.
Thank you, Anya. Thank you. We'll definitely keep us posted.
Absolutely.
Keep us posted. So we look forward to sitting down with you again.
Thank you.